The stage was set. The anticipation was palpable, as if the entire nation was holding its breath in unison, waiting for the grand reveal. The nation held its breath. Every eye was glued to screens, every ear tuned to the announcements that would shape the future of millions. Budget 2024 arrived with fanfare, promising prosperity and progress. The air was thick with hope and expectation as colorful parades and celebrations erupted across the country. Millions hoped for relief, for a brighter future. Families dreamed of better days, of opportunities that would lift them out of hardship and into a new era of growth. Little did they know, a storm was brewing. Dark clouds of uncertainty began to gather on the horizon, casting long shadows over the initial euphoria. A storm of disastrous policies and shattered dreams. The promises that once seemed so bright began to fade, replaced by anxiety and stress as the reality of the budget's implications set in. This was not a budget for the people. This was a betrayal. Discontent grew, and soon the streets were filled with voices of protest, banners waving in defiance against the perceived injustice. The finance minister, with a confident smile, announced grand plans and lofty targets. His words were filled with optimism, painting a picture of a prosperous future. But behind the rhetoric, a sinister reality lurked. Hidden behind the grandiose statements were policies that threatened to widen the gap between the rich and the poor. The numbers didn't add up. The promises rang hollow. As analysts delved into the details, discrepancies emerged, revealing a budget that was more illusion than substance. This was the beginning of the end. The cracks in the foundation of the budget began to show, symbolizing the crumbling trust and the broken promises that would haunt the nation for years to come. Healthcare, the backbone of a nation, was dealt a devastating blow. Budget 2024 slashed funding, leaving hospitals understaffed and ill-equipped. The message was clear. The government had abandoned its people. Promises of affordable healthcare lay shattered. The elderly were left to fend for themselves. Children, our future, were denied a healthy start. This wasn't just a budget cut. It was a death sentence for countless Indians. Education, the key to progress, was thrown into disarray. Budget 2024 cut funding for schools and universities. The dreams of millions of young Indians were crushed under the weight of this disastrous decision. Libraries lay empty. Classrooms remained overcrowded. Teachers were burdened with impossible workloads. The government, instead of nurturing young minds, had chosen to stifle their potential. This was a crime against an entire generation. The economy, once a beacon of hope, sputtered under the weight of misguided policies. Budget 2024 failed to stimulate growth, instead opting for short-sighted measures that benefited only a select few. Investment dried up, jobs became scarce. The common man struggled to put food on the table. The promise of a thriving economy lay in tatters. This was not just mismanagement, it was economic sabotage. Section 5. The people's fury ignites, public outrage erupts. The streets were filled with a sea of people, their voices rising in unison, demanding justice and accountability. Across the nation, a wave of anger erupted. It was a sight to behold, a testament to the collective power of the people when pushed to their limits. From the bustling streets of Mumbai to the villages of rural India, people took to the streets. The urban and rural divide seemed to vanish as everyone stood together, united by a common cause. They had been betrayed, and they would not be silenced. The signs they held were not just pieces of cardboard, but symbols of their frustration and anger. Students, farmers, teachers, doctors, all united in their condemnation of this disastrous budget. It was a rare sight to see such a diverse group of people coming together, each with their own grievances, but united in their demand for change. Social media was ablaze with criticism. Hashtags condemning the budget trended for days, and posts criticizing the government went viral, amplifying the voices of the protesters. The government had lost the trust of its people. The disillusionment was palpable, and the signs of distrust were everywhere, from the streets to the digital world. This was a wake-up call, a sign of their dwindling power. The protesters were not just calling for change, they were demanding it, and the government could no longer ignore their voices. The imagery of government buildings surrounded by protesters was a powerful symbol of the people's determination to reclaim their power. Section 6. Ghosts of Budgets Past. A look back at success. The ghosts of successful budgets past haunted the present. Budgets that had prioritized healthcare and education. Budgets that had fostered economic growth and lifted millions out of poverty. Those days were gone, replaced by a government that seemed intent on undoing years of progress. The contrast was stark, a painful reminder of what could have been. Section 7. The pundits weigh in expert opinions on the crisis. Economists and policy experts were united in their condemnation. They pointed to flawed assumptions, unrealistic targets, and a complete disregard for the needs of the people. The consensus was clear. This was the worst budget in India's history. The damage, they warned, would be felt for generations to come. This was not just an opinion, it was a fact. Section 8. A legacy of failure. Long-term impacts. Loom. The consequences of this disastrous budget will be felt for years to come. A generation denied quality healthcare and education. An economy in shambles. A nation divided. This was not just a budget, it was a blueprint for disaster. A legacy of failure that would be difficult, if not impossible, to erase. Section 9. The blame game begins. Who will take responsibility? The blame game has begun. Politicians pointing fingers, shifting responsibility. But the people are not fooled. They know who is responsible for this catastrophe. The government elected to serve the people has failed in its duty. They have betrayed the trust placed in them. They must be held accountable. Section 10. A nation in peril. Can India recover from this blow? The question on everyone's mind as the nation grapples with the aftermath of a devastating economic downturn. India, a nation on the rise, now stands on the precipice. Once a beacon of hope and progress, it now faces an uncertain future. The hopes of millions dashed against the rocks of this disastrous budget. The future looks bleak. Families are struggling, businesses are closing, and the once thriving economy is now in shambles. The road to recovery will be long and arduous. It will require immense effort, resilience, and unity from every corner of the nation. From the bustling cities to the quiet rural areas, everyone will need to contribute. But the spirit of the Indian people is unbreakable. In times of crisis, they have always shown remarkable strength and solidarity. Communities come together, helping one another, celebrating their shared heritage and culture. They will rise to the challenge. They will rebuild their nation. Infrastructure will be restored, new opportunities will be created, and the environment will be nurtured back to health. But the scars of this betrayal will remain. The memories of this hardship will linger, serving as a reminder of the resilience and determination that define the Indian spirit. The journey ahead is daunting, but with unwavering resolve, India will emerge stronger.